So this is the last scientific session of this 5 days Atal FTP. So this is the 13th session, scientific session, what has been organized. And we have a very eminent speaker for this session, Dr. Sarsija Suresh. Madam is a project director, Institute of Drug Delivery and Biomedical Research, IDBR, Bangalore. And Madam is a very good speaker. She has deliberated in many of the conferences, and she's a very good academician, and a lot of consultancy projects are going under Madam. So it's a very delightful moment to have Madam with us today to share her expertise and experiences to all of us over here. Madam, shall we begin? With your
Okay.
permission?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay. Once, yeah.
When shall we start, ma'am?
Yeah. 1 sec. Yeah, I'm just sharing the screen.
Ma'am, first introduction to all the delegates for you. Then you can share the screen, ma'am, please.
Okay, right.
Okay.
Sure.
I request Dr. H.N. Sholapur, sir, to introduce Dr. Sarsija, ma'am, to all of us.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, madam. Good morning, Narasimhamurthy, sir. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce one of the eminent personality as a resource person for this program, Dr. Sarsija Suresh, madam. Madam has obtained B.Pharm and M.Pharm from Government College of Pharmacy in the year 84 and 86. She has pursued her PhD under the guidance of eminent person, Dr. C.V.S. Subramaniam, sir, from College of Pharmaceutical Sciences, Manipal. After serving for 23 years in Al-Amin College of Pharmacy, she was a faculty at NIPER, Mohali, and MS Ramaiah University of Applied Sciences. Presently, Madam is a project director at Institute of Drug Delivery and Biomedical Research, IDBR, Bangalore, and also a co-founder of a startup company, RGV Research and Innovation Private Limited, for research in safe and efficacious medicine. She has working for over 2 decades in drug delivery, on drug delivery research, including nanotechnology, with funding from Government of India grants from CSIR, AICTE, DST, DBT, Wellcome Trust, German academic research, and has collaborated with institutions and industries in India and abroad. Madam is a recipient of several national and international fellowships and awards, including DAD, German Academic Exchange Fellowship Award, Career Award for Young Teachers of from AICTE, Wellcome Trust Fellowship Award, Stars Award for Excellence in Teaching and Research by American Alumni Association of Government College of Pharmacy, Bangalore, and Women of the Year 2015 Award, awarded by Association of Pharmaceutical Teachers of India, and many more. Madam has guided 65 M.Pharm students, 11 PhD scholars, and has filed 13 patents. 8 patents have already been granted. 1 is PCT, and she has published over 100 research papers in peer-reviewed journals and presentation in national and international conferences, with 7 best paper awards in conference and journals. She has published 2 books on pharmaceutical engineering and several book chapters on nanotechnology. Madam focus on this research and consultancy is on drug delivery research, particularly nanotechnology, for developing safe and efficacious commercially viable products. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are fortunate enough to have amongst us such an eminent personality as speaker for this session. So, with this brief introduction, I request Madam to take over the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. So, good morning to one and all. Thank you for being here. So, I'll be talking on advances in drug delivery system. For the area of vaccines. So first of all, I take this opportunity to thank the organizers and in particular, Dr. Fatima for this opportunity. So am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible and screen also has been shared.
Okay. So the topic, as I said, is recent advances in delivery of vaccines. And as we all know, conventional vaccines are given as solution by the intradermal, intramuscular, and subcutaneous routes. Now, with the advent of next generation vaccines, there is a need for new delivery systems to deliver the next generation vaccines, especially composed of nucleic acids, effectively. And we all have seen that COVID-19 pandemic has hastened the development of next generation vaccines. And also it has shown the success of new delivery systems in delivering nucleic acid vaccines in order to control the pandemic. So today I will be talking about this delivery systems that has helped in efficient delivery of next generation vaccines, and also it has paved the way for development of nucleic acids, not only as vaccines, but also in therapy. And also I will be talking about the success of conventional vaccines too. So with this, so my contents of the talk will be the conventional vaccines versus the new generation vaccines. And we will look at COVID-19 vaccines in use. We will look into the conventional vaccines. And then we will discuss about the new generation vaccines, especially the mRNA vaccine and adenovector-based vaccines. And then we will look into recent developments, the DNA vaccines that have been which has got the permission, and nasal vaccines which are undergoing phase 3 clinical trials. Now, let us see how conventional vaccines work. So vaccine actually introduces a safe amount of antigens in the body. And our immune system, it recognizes the antigen as foreign. And then antibodies are developed against the antigen. And this protects us against future infections. So we all know that Edward Jenner, he developed the first vaccine to eradicate smallpox using live attenuated vaccinia virus. So that means the majority of the conventional vaccines are developed either from the whole or subunits of the microorganisms. We know that based on whole organisms, we have live attenuated vaccines and we have inactivated or killed vaccines. So under the category of live attenuated, we have the vaccinia virus vaccine for smallpox. And we know that this virus is not the one that causes smallpox, but it is vaccinia virus actually causes cowpox. And Edward Jenner, he's observed that milkmaids who had cowpox, they were not susceptible to smallpox, which was a deadly disease at that time. And now it has, of course, been eradicated. So this picture shows him intradermally administering weakened cowpox. So when this weakened cowpox was administered intradermally to this boy called James, it was seen that James did not contact smallpox. So thus, he was able to prove that using weakened virus, the person was able to develop immunity against the disease. And here it is an example of a related virus. Similarly, BCG vaccine is also an example of that is bacteria, a related bacteria which is live and attenuated, that is weakened, used to that is develop immunity against TB. And then we have the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, all examples under this category. But there is a problem with this live attenuated vaccine. The problem is there is always a chance that it can become virulent. There can be a mutation and there can be virulence. Hence, there was development of inactivated or killed vaccines. So under this category, we have polio vaccine. Of course, polio, we also have oral rabies and hepatitis A vaccine, where it is actually inactivated or killed, but it retains its ability to develop antibodies. Now, we have another category, subunit vaccines, especially in case of bacteria. So here, the vaccine is developed from proteins or parts of the microorganism. For example, in case of, they say, diphtheria, it is not the bacteria that causes the disease, it is the toxoid produced by the bacteria that is causing the disease. So here, the toxin produced by the bacteria was inactivated to form the toxoids, and these toxoids were used as vaccines. Now, not all bacteria, they are producing toxins per se. So some cases, what is done is, they use a combination of, that is the lipopolysaccharide that is present on the capsule, and in combination with certain adjuvants, again proteins, in order to form what is called as a conjugate vaccine. This is especially necessary if the lipopolysaccharide is not enough, it is not having the antigenic potential per se, and there is a need for further activation. So, so to summarize, this conventional vaccines, what are the challenges? So first is the probability of this attenuated vaccine reversing to the active form. Then there is ensuring inactivation of the microorganisms. Especially we see that when you say it is killed or inactivated, we need to be sure that it is inactivated. We need to be sure that it has been killed. And the third challenge is, see, we have to sort of grow a large amount of this microorganism. So what are the challenges in the large scale vaccine production? So we, for example, in case of COVID-19 pandemic, we saw that the pandemic is all over the world. So we need to grow a large amount of this virus. So a challenge in terms of the safety, the cost, and the facility. So these are the challenges of the conventional vaccine. Now let us look at the next generation vaccines. Now the next generation vaccines are composed of nucleotides that can be either DNA or RNA, which induce production of antibodies in our cell that activate our immune system. So here it is, our body is producing the proteins, whereas in case of conventional, it is, we are injecting the proteins, inactive proteins, or the inactivated form of the microorganism into the body. So this groundbreaking research over past 30 years has resulted in effective delivery platforms enabling nucleic acid therapeutics. So this next generation vaccines is essentially composed of nucleic acids, and this nucleic acid was first used in therapy. Now the success of nucleic acid in therapy was then used to deliver nucleic acid itself as a vaccine to combat COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, there was a lot of research in this area, but COVID-19 became what is called as a platform where it could be tested because of because it was a pandemic, it was a deadly pandemic. So in other words, how do next generation vaccines work? Vaccine introduces nucleic acids in the body. Antigen is then produced within the body, and this antigen, it triggers our immune system, and antibodies are then developed against the antigen, protecting against future infections. So in other words, instead of the antigen being produced in large amounts, the antigen is produced within the body in each one of the person into which it has been, say, introduced. So now let us look into this new generation vaccines. Basically, they are we, with say nearly 30 years of research work, I mean, in 2019, we saw the success of nucleic acid in therapy. So bringing about what we call as nucleic acid therapeutics. Now, this nucleic acid therapeutics include both DNA and RNA. So, for example, RNA, that is small interfering RNA, which interferes with the translation of the RNA, especially the messenger, in particular the messenger RNA. Then we have messenger RNA, and we also have DNA being used as a means of therapy. But there are a number of challenges with this nucleic acids in delivering the nucleic acids, because it undergoes degradation. And the second point is, it is difficult to reach the action site. See, as soon as it is injected into the body, the nucleases, they destroy the nucleic acid. In case it is able to evade the nucleases, it is difficult to reach the action site. So it has to enter into the action site, and then it has to deliver the nucleic acids. The nucleic acids has to then, say if it is DNA, it has to get transcribed, then to mRNA, then mRNA has to get converted into the protein. And of course, the cost. Then over a period of time, delivery systems have been developed to effectively deliver nucleic acids. So these delivery systems, that is novel delivery systems, which actually combined a number of delivery systems, and that was successfully used in therapy. So when it was successfully used in therapy, at that time, that the technology that enabled the nucleic acids to be used in therapy was used for delivering the next generation vaccines. So what are the technologies, or what are the technologies include? It includes mRNA DNA vaccine, adenovector vaccines, and we have the recombinant protein. So thus we have now discussed about the conventional vaccines, and we are looked into the next generation vaccines. Now let us look into more about them, how they are being prepared, how we can classify them together as a vaccine, that is as vaccine system. So what are vaccines made up of? What are the types of vaccines? So we have actually three main approaches to make a vaccine: using a whole virus or bacterium, that is using as we saw, the live attenuated form or the inactivated form, or parts that trigger the immune system, like for example, the toxoid, or it can be the lipopolysaccharide, or we have the third approach, thus the genetic material. So let us look into more about these three approaches. So first, we have the whole microbe approach for making the vaccines. As we discussed, it is inactivated vaccine, or we have live attenuated vaccine, or we have a viral vector vaccine. So we are having a virus that carries that is the genome, and this virus is acting as a vector, and the genetic material is then being it is being delivered into the cell with the help of this virus. Next, we have the subunit approach. So subunit approach, we are using only, as we discussed, about the specific parts of the microorganism. So as we discussed, in case of conventional method, so the microorganism is grown, and either the toxoid or the component, the polysaccharide is extracted and then used as a vaccine. Now, with the advent of this next generation vaccine, we have a recombinant DNA technology used to transfer the gene for making the subunit. And this, maybe it is like in the form of a plasmid, and the plasmid is introduced into say a harmless bacteria sort of called, say, for example, E. coli. Then when E. coli grows, this particular protein is then that is produced, and that is then extracted and then used as a vaccine. So Novavax is a example of a protein that is a recombinant protein, which is being used for making what you call a subunit vaccine for COVID-19, which is under clinical trials. The third is the nucleic acid vaccines, where we have the genetic material. So the genetic material can be either DNA or it can be mRNA. Now, if it is a DNA, the need is that the DNA has to enter into, say, the nucleic acid. From the nucleic acid has to get transcribed into mRNA. And from the mRNA is then translated into the protein. So if it is a DNA vaccine, we have two steps. So we have transcription and then translation. But if it is a mRNA vaccine, we have only the translation step. So translation into the protein. And this protein is actually developed within the body. So the whole process is occurring within the body in case of this nucleic acid vaccine. Now let us look into this coronavirus disease, commonly called as COVID-19, because it was discovered in 2019 vaccines. So COVID-19 vaccines, we have both conventional and next generation vaccines. And these vaccines have been developed based on the structure of the SARS-CoV-2. So we know that this is the virus, severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2. So it is called as 2 because in 2002, we had SARS-CoV-1. So at that time, it was not a pandemic, but that the disease, it enabled scientists to study in detail about the coronavirus. And once they studied the coronavirus, especially the SARS-CoV-2, they knew how it was, how the virus was causing the infection, which part of the virus was antigenic. And so this information enabled the development of COVID-19 vaccines. Now, if you see the structure of the coronavirus or COVID-19, vaccine, COVID-19 virus, the virus that causes COVID-19, you can see that it has spike protein as a crown around the virus. So this spike protein is necessary for the virus to adhere to the cells and then for the virus to enter into the cell. So they found that the spike protein is antigenic, and this antibodies developed against spike protein was enough to provide protection against COVID-19. So thus here we have two types of vaccines. One is the conventional vaccines being developed against a whole virus. And next, we have the next generation virus vaccines targeting the spike protein. So under the conventional vaccine, we have the inactivated vaccines, which you have all heard. We all know about it. Many of us have taken. So Covaxin produced by Bharat Biotech. So here, this is an example of a killed virus. So this COVID virus has been chemically inactivated by or killed by soaking in beta-propiolactone. So this is one method that has been adopted. Of course, there are other methods of inactivation, either by heat or inactivation by radiation. So Covaxin has been actually grown in viro cells to make it, that is, in order to see that it is further inactivated, and then it has been killed chemically so that it has retained its antigenic potential. Of course, there is a need for adjuvants so as to increase its antigenic potential. Now, there are 8 other vaccines which have adopted the same technology. So the advantage of this conventional vaccines, especially the inactivated vaccine, is safety and stability. Safety because it is a time-tested approach. So we have other vaccines which have adopted the same technology. So they have been used from ages. So we know that it is safe. It can be administered to children. It can be administered to elderly. Second advantage is stability. Because it is the inactivated virus, the whole viral component as such is present. It is stable, say from 2 to 8 degrees centigrade. And so this is another advantage, especially in our country, that is and other tropical countries. So with this conventional vaccine has disadvantages, as we discussed, that the need for growing large amount of the virus, the challenges with manufacturing, the challenges with the facility, and also the challenges with safety. Now let us look into the next generation vaccines, which do have the advantages, but which do also have disadvantages in terms of other aspects like stability. So this new generation vaccines too have been approved at the category, that is mRNA vaccines and vector vaccines have been approved. Both of them target the spike protein. Both of them produce the antibodies against the spike protein, which prevents further infections. We have a third category, that is DNA vaccines. Now, DNA vaccines, it has got approval, emergency use approval, but it is still not, we have not yet seen it being actually administered. So DNA vaccine, for example, by Zydus Cadila, it has been approved, and there are talks of it being in use shortly. So now let us look at the mRNA vaccines. So mRNA or messenger RNA COVID-19 vaccine, this is composed of lipid nanoparticles, which contains mRNA for the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2. Now this lipid nanoparticles, it delivers the mRNA into cells. So for translation into the spike protein, and the spike protein then triggers our immune system to produce the antibodies. So we know that there are 2 vaccines under this category: Pfizer-BioNTech Comirnaty mRNA vaccine and Moderna Spikevax vaccine. And so these 2 vaccines, that is, they are an important milestone. They indicate first time RNA vaccine has been ever tested. Though there have been studies, though there have been vaccines developed against Zika virus, but still they were not tested. They were not tested for various reasons. One is, of course, testing, it is very expensive, clinical trials expensive, and also it has to be tested in different sites, the number of cases. So all this was seen in case of COVID-19 pandemic. It was all over the world, and we had funding from all that is companies, then funding agencies, from governments. So we had funding from many sources, and there was the cooperation between the regulatory, scientists, companies. So all together, it enabled the first time the RNA vaccine to be tested. So with this, let us look more into this mRNA vaccine. Let us see how it works. In simple words, we can call it as a fat bubble. And this fat bubble, it is lipid nanoparticle, which delivers the messenger RNA into the cells. So this lipid nanoparticle, it enables efficient entry of mRNA into the cells. So then this mRNA then travels to the ribosome. So in the ribosome then converts the mRNA. It translates the mRNA into the SARS-CoV spike protein. And then this protein is then, it acts as the antigen. So it is presented on the cells and antibodies are then developed against the antigen, against the spike protein. Now, why is LNP successful as a delivery mechanism? So the reason why it is successful is if it is an unprotected mRNA, it gets degraded by nucleases. If you have an exogenous antigen, it may enter into the cell, but it gets lodged within the endosome because of the protective mechanism. Whereas LNP, it helps to not only to protect the mRNA in the extracellular matrix, it helps to gain entry, and in the endosome, it helps to release the mRNA. So once the mRNA is released in the endosome, it gets translated into the protein. So thus it is an efficient delivery system for delivering the mRNA into the cell so that it gets translated into the protein. So now I would like to discuss briefly the history of lipid nanoparticle and nucleic acid therapeutics. See, in 2019, FDA approved Onpattro, also called as patisiran, which is based on RNA interference. It is an RNA interference therapeutic agent. That means it is interfering with mRNA. So it is interfering with the translation of mRNA into the protein to treat a genetic disease called as transthyretin amyloidosis. Now, this disease, there is a deposition of this mutant transthyretin as amyloid fibrils in the peripheral tissue, which results in progressive fatal neurodegeneration. So because there is a mutation in the gene, there is a mutant protein being formed. So this mutant protein is causing neurodegeneration. So what patisiran did was, it actually blocked the mRNA from being translated into the mutant protein. So the small interfering RNA is actually this is actually a small interfering RNA. So this was developed to silence the mutant gene by interfering with transthyretin mRNA translation. So it actually went, it is a small strand of RNA. It went and blocked the mRNA so that this mRNA could not get translated into the mutant protein. And the siRNA went and interfered with the translation of the mRNA that had the mutant that was producing the mutant protein. So it was a mutant mRNA. So when the small interfering RNA was developed, there was a challenge. So the major challenge was the delivery of this small interfering RNA into the cells, here into the liver. So this was overcome by lipid nanoparticle. And once it was overcome by this lipid nanoparticle, this particular technology, this LNP containing this siRNA, was called as Onpattro, and this is the first approved nucleic acid product in therapy. And thus we can see that LNP delivery system enabled efficient delivery of nucleic acids. So thus there is a delivery system which can efficiently deliver nucleic acids that paved the way for other diseases. Then the same technology was used for another genetic disease. So this happened in 2019. So when this happened in 2019, and when the pandemic occurred, so this technology was then transferred into mRNA vaccine, where a lot of studies were going on developing an mRNA vaccine. So mRNA vaccine was there, a technology was there. Together, this resulted in mRNA vaccine system. So what is let's look into the structure of this small interfering RNA lipid nanoparticles, just to understand how it is being formed. So here we have the TEM image, and we have a schematic diagram of siRNA lipid nanoparticle. So actually, it essentially contains 4 components along with the small interfering RNA. So we have the PEG lipid at the top, sort of decorating the lipid nanoparticle. We have the cationic lipid that is having the red head. Then we have the siRNA, that is small sigma-like structure. Then in the center, with the blue head, we have the neutral phospholipid. And then we have cholesterol in between. So cholesterol, it acts as a stabilizing agent. So thus we can see this is a liposomal formulation. Basically, it is a liposomal bilayer, the liposomal layer, liposomal formulation containing a lipoplex. What is a lipoplex? A lipoplex is a combination of a lipid with nucleic acid. In this case, it is this siRNA. So siRNA, it is complexed with that is the cationic lipid, and this complex is present in such a way that it is protected. It is protected at the same time. It is held in place, and we have in the center the neutral phospholipid, which is giving it stability. We have the cholesterol, which is giving stability to the bilayer. And we have the PEG lipid as a crown. So here this PEG lipid gives the hydrophilicity. So during storage, it prevents that is aggregation, and also it helps in transfection. It helps the RNA to escape from the endosome into the cytoplasm. So thus here we can see here there is a combination of 2 types of formulation. So one is a liposomal formulation, and other is a lipoplex, where we used to call it, if it is a combination of lipid and nucleic acid, we call it as a lipoplex. But if it is a drug molecule, we do call it as a drug phospholipid complex. We call it as a micelle. So we have these 2 technologies combined together for effective delivery of siRNA. So now I just want to look into the history of LNP and delivery of nucleic acids. So we, as we all know that liposomes were developed nearly 30 years ago. We have a number of liposomal drug products in cancer for treating fungal infection, like for example, amphotericin, cancer doxorubicin, daunorubicin, number of cancer drugs being formulated as liposomal drug products. We also have micelles of drug phospholipid complex for enhancing the bioavailability of anti-cancer drugs. And so this has been there for nearly over more than 2 decades. This is as a result of a lot of research work. At the same time, gene therapy was extensively investigated to treat diseases of, especially the genetic diseases. So the first attempt was to apply DNA in therapy. Now, application of DNA in therapy was not successful because there is a need to deliver the DNA into the nucleus. So initially they used vectors to deliver DNA, and that proved to be really hazardous. And because there was it caused mutation, and that is in the late 90s, there was a death of a patient because of the mutation caused by the DNA that was used to treat a genetic disease. Then the studies shifted to RNA. So whatever lessons that were developed, whatever lessons, technologies that were developed, whatever lessons that were learned from DNA in therapy, that was applied to mRNA. So that is how to synthesize the nucleic acids, the synthetic route optimization. So all that was used for mRNA. So mRNA was extensively studied for the last 25 years, and especially over last, say, 15 years, it has been met with success because there are a lot of challenges with RNA delivery. Because RNA gets destroyed by tissue nucleases after injection. Then entry of RNA into the cells is difficult. Then even if it enters, it gets trapped within the endosome. And after, say, if it is released from the endosome, if it escapes the endosome and it is released into the cytoplasm, then there can be severe inflammatory reactions. So the products that are produced, because mRNA is actually the mRNA that we are introducing is something foreign to the body. So when a foreign mRNA is introduced and a foreign protein is formed, this foreign protein causes severe reactions, severe inflammatory reactions. So these were all the challenges. And 2005, this mRNA, that is mRNA vaccine, was successfully developed, taking all these challenges into consideration. They tried to stabilize the mRNA. They tried to see that this mRNA, there was changes made in mRNA so that this mRNA no longer was able to cause severe inflammatory reactions. And then finally, what we saw is the LNP, it enabled the efficient delivery of RNA. See, we can have an we can have a safe, we can have a stable mRNA, but there is a need for its delivery into the cell. So LNP enabled the efficient delivery of RNA into the cell. So with this, let us now look at the structure of mRNA lipid nanoparticle. Now, if you see compare the structure of mRNA lipid nanoparticle with siRNA lipid nanoparticle, there is a difference. Here you see that the that is the RNA is present in the core. Now, this mRNA is present in the core because it is a huge molecule when compared to small interfering RNA. So siRNA is a small, it is only 25 base pair nucleotide, whereas mRNA is a nucleotide with a large number of nucleotides. So here we see that because of the large size, this RNA is present in the core, surrounded by a bilayer of lipid. And on the surface, we can see the PEG lipid. So it is pegylated and the PEG lipid is present in the surface. So the structure is the same as that of siRNA lipid nanoparticle, except for the where the complex of mRNA lipid is present. And if you look at the structure of the mRNA in the center, you can see that this mRNA, you can see that that is a cationic lipid. So the cationic lipid, that is a positively charged lipid, is complexing with the negative component in the mRNA. So mRNA, because of the phosphate groups, is negatively charged. It is anionic, and the cationic lipid, it complexes with the anionic component, and this complex is present in the this complex is formed. So this complex, the lipoplex, is formed. So it stabilizes the mRNA, and this complex is then surrounded by a lipid layer, which further stabilizes the complex. And then we have the PEG, which again protects the lipid nanoparticle because of its hydrophilic component, that is a PEG group. So now let us see the composition of this mRNA in detail. So the mRNA vaccine is composed of cationic lipid, neutral lipid, cholesterol, PEG lipid, and mRNA. Now the cationic lipid is made up of the phospholipid containing amine tertiary groups. So amine tertiary groups in acidic pH has a positive charge. And this cationic lipid has been so selected that it is not a very strong cationic lipid. Only in the acidic pH, it is having a positive charge. Suppose it permanently has a positive charge that can cause toxicity. So in the neutral pH, it loses its charge. So because of this, the cationic nature, it is complexing with the, it is helping the mRNA to be delivered into the cell. It helps it to gain entry into the cell, and also it helps it to be released from the endosome. Then we have the neutral lipid, neutral phospholipid, like disteroid phosphatidylcholine. So this helps in bilayer formation, and this gives stability to the lipid nanoparticle. Then we have cholesterol, which again provides stability, and we have the PEG lipid. Now this polyethylene glycol, we all know that it is positively charged. We use it as a co-solvent. It is used to dissolve lipidic material. So here the lipid and PEG combination is used, so that lipid gets incorporated into the bilayer, and the polyethylene glycol part is present on the surface. And we have studied this polyethylene glycol. It always helps. It helps in evading our immune system. The sleep, like sleep liposomes, because of its hydrophilic nature. So PEG evades the immune system. Now PEG lipid that is used, it is having C14 alkyl chains, and actually this PEG lipid enables particle formation, it enables stability, it enables transfection, but it can also cause toxicity. So the PEG lipid that is chosen is such a way that it is a small component, less than 5%, and it is just sufficient to provide stability and transfection and not cause the inflammatory response or toxicity because of the presence of this PEG in larger concentration. The cationic lipid is present in larger concentration. Cholesterol also, say around 30%, cationic lipid up to 50%. So along with the neutral lipid, say 20%. And so we have PEG lipid just making a small percentage, a small component of the lipid nanoparticle. And then we have the mRNA. Now this mRNA has been modified, as we discussed, in order to make it safer, in order to make it stable. So in order to make it safer, what was done was the uracil. So we know that mRNA has uracil and DNA has thymine. So uracil, because it is, say it is again the uracil which has been used is of the from the virus, the viral component. This is causing severe inflammatory response. So uracil was replaced with pseudouridine. Now pseudouridine, they found that it reduced the untoward inflammatory response. And deliberately they worked on the mRNA nucleotide. So what they did is they changed two of the the bases so that this mRNA that mRNA, when it is translated, the protein that is formed, it is what is called as the prefusion stage. So prefusion stage, that is the stage before the protein fuses with the cell. So in the prefusion stage, the spike protein was found to be stable. So it was found to be stable, and so that it is then presented onto the surface of the cell. That is, and then this after this antigen is presented onto the surface of the cell, our immune response, that is, our immune system recognizes it as foreign, and then it develops the antibodies. So for the stability, deliberately the mRNA nucleotide was modified. So two of the bases were replaced, and as we discussed, pseudouridine increases stability and it reduces the immunogenicity. See, we have to here understand that this mRNA sequentially, step by step, they changed the bases and they studied when which base was required for it to provide stability and so that we could get the spike protein in the prefusion stage. So these are the different components that make up the mRNA vaccine. So with this, let us now look at how this mRNA like nanoparticle is obtained. So here we can see that we have two components. We have lipids and ethanol. We have mRNA in water. So ethanol, because lipids, we know that they are not soluble in water, and especially cholesterol, and mRNA because it is hydrophilic. Now at pH 4, when mRNA has a positive charge, and at pH 4, the cationic lipid, because of the tertiary amine groups, also the mRNA has a negative charge, and the tertiary amino group has a positive charge. So when it is mixed, because of the negative charge of the in the mRNA, the positively charged cationic lipid will complex with the negative charge to form the complex, to form the lipoplex. So as more and more of the lipid and water is mixed, we can see that first there is formation of the complex because of the opposite charge. And as we all know, this liposomes, they spontaneously form the micelles. So when they are forming these micelles for thermodynamic stability, inside they incorporate the hydrophilic phase. And in the hydrophilic phase, we have the mRNA lipid complex. And PEG, it associates itself and it sort of towards the exterior of the lipid particle. So thus we have, one is the formation of the complex, then spontaneous formation of the micelles or the liposomes, and this the liposomes entrap the aqueous phase, and in the aqueous phase we see that the lipoplex is present. So at pH, say in the neutral pH in our body, the surface has no charge because this cationic lipids at the pH, say about 6.5, they have no charge. So as a result of which the lipid nanoparticle exhibits no charge, and we have the PEG protecting the particle. So now this particular, this tells us about the method of preparation of the lipid nanoparticle. So the method of preparation of lipid nanoparticle is based on the modified ethanol injection method. So people who have worked on liposomes, we all know that there are two methods. One is the that is thin film hydration method, and then we have the ethanol injection method. And ethanol injection method has been used for preparing liposomes nearly, say, 30 years ago. It has been used for preparing neosomes, where lipids are replaced with non-ionic surfactants. So the method is simple. So here we take lipids, it is mixed in ethanol, and mRNA is mixed in water, and at pH 4, they are combined together, and they are combined together and mixed under pressure, high pressure. So it is required to get the nanoparticle. So here what we see is the lipids mixed in ethanol. If it had been only the phospholipid, we would have got the nanoparticle. We would have got the formation of micelles, and these micelles are in the nano range. But because of the presence of a large concentration of lipids, we have seen nearly, say, 50 to 70%. So the liposomes that are formed are of large size. As a result, there is a need to mix it under high pressure. So we are having new methods of mixing. So on the right-hand side, we can see microfluidic mixing techniques, that is using staggered herringbone mixer, or we are having inline T-junction mixing, or microfluidic hydrodynamic mixing. C is microfluidic hydrodynamic mixing. So what is the principle behind all the three methods is the same. Both are mixed. The aqueous phase containing the RNA and ethanol containing the lipids, it is mixed. And it is mixed, and then it is under high pressure to obtain the nanoparticle. So here we can say RNA, say here, for example, RNA is in red and the blue indicates the lipids and ethanol, and the violet indicates the formation of the lipid nanoparticle. Of course, here one aspect we have to remember, the lipids mixed in ethanol, the concentration of ethanol is quite high, it's about nearly 40%. And so as it gets diluted, so more and more of the lipid nanoparticle is formed. So thus we can see that the method of preparation of this mRNA lipid nanoparticle is commercially viable method, because commercially viability has been already shown during the preparation of liposomes. It has already been seen during the preparation of micelles. Of course, in micelles, because amount of phospholipid is less, it is a single step process. There is no need of the size reduction that is seen in case of the lipid nanoparticle. So this the advantages of mRNA lipid is it enables efficient delivery of mRNA. It's a commercially viable process, and mRNA can be prepared faster in comparison to the conventional vaccine. So mRNA is a synthetic method. So it is synthetic method, and it is in the lab, and whatever is a facility that is available for synthesis of mRNA or for a particular disease, that same facility can be used for synthesizing mRNA for other vaccines or other treating other diseases. So though it is expensive, the facilities for preparation of mRNA or RNA in say in general can be used for other diseases, maybe in therapy or vaccines. And another advantage of mRNA lipid nanoparticle is this mRNA degrades over time. It degrades fast. In fact, we have seen that they try to stabilize the time that it stayed within the cytoplasm. Since it degrades, the toxicity is less when compared to DNA. DNA, it tends to integrate with the host cell genome, and it causing say mutation or causing diseases which may not be immediately seen. So this seeing the success of this mRNA LNP, we have its application. We have seen its its application in treating other diseases, other infectious diseases as vaccine, and also treating other diseases of genetic origin, which has been plaguing the world. For example, hemophilia. So we have such genetic diseases. There has been research going on using LNP to say LNP as a delivery system to deliver the nucleic acids to correct the disease at the genetic level. So with this, we have now seen how mRNA LNP has exhibited enormous potential for delivery of nucleic acids, and its success we have all seen in case of mRNA vaccines. Now with this, let us go to vector vaccines. So here in the vector vaccine, we have a vector. So the vector is a virus. So this carries the information for production of spike protein in the body. And this spike protein then, as we have been discussing, it activates our immune system. So we have three, that is vaccines that have been approved: Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which you have already seen. Many of us have taken Covishield, Russian vaccine, Sputnik vaccine, and Johnson & Johnson's Janssen vaccine, which has also been approved. So you can see the pictures. We have the one is the Covishield COVID-19 and the Janssen's COVID-19 vaccine. So if you see on the label, for example, COVID-19 vaccine, it says that the COVID-19 vaccine AD26 COV to S standing for the spike protein. And if you see the Covishield, it says ChAd OX1 vaccine. So this stands for the vector that has been used. So the vector that has been used is an adenovector. So this adenovector has been, adenovector is a harmless virus which generally causes common cold. And this virus has been actually, it has been modified. It has been genetically modified so that it does not have the capacity to multiply. And into its genome, the spike protein genome has been introduced by recombinant DNA technology. And this this vector, the adenovector, it takes the that is, it takes the spike protein genetic material into the cell, and then we have, from the DNA we have RNA, and from RNA we have the synthesis of the translation or the synthesis of the spike protein. So let us look into more about this adenovector vaccine. So I've taken the example of Sputnik V vaccine because it has actually it has two adenovectors. So if you see the vaccine creation, that is this two vector vaccine creation. So it has, the spike protein gene has been introduced into two adenovirus vectors. That is, one is AD26 and other one is AD5. So these are human adenovector virus. And what happens is during the first vaccination, the gene coding for the spike protein is released. That is, the we have the mRNA from mRNA translating it into the antibodies, and so we have the antibodies against the spike protein. But there can be a problem. See, the adenovirus, there can be immunity against the adenovirus. So in order to overcome the immunity against adenovirus, what the Russian group did was they used in the second vaccination a different adenovirus. So this variant is called AD5. So it also, the principle is the same. It contains the S protein gene, and which develops, which is then for which we have development of the antibodies. So they tried to overcome the chances of development of antibodies against the adenovirus itself. So that is why the second vaccination that is taken after 21 days is the adenovirus is different from the adenovirus that is used in the first vaccination. So since here there is one point, since it is the genetic material is entering into say into the nucleus, it is, and then there is a conversion into the mRNA and the protein, it is able to provide that is long-lasting immunity. So with the adenovector vector vaccines, now let us look into DNA vaccines. Now, in case of DNA vaccines, this DNA vaccines has not been still up, like it has still not been in use. And Zydus Cadila, in partnership with DBT, it has developed 3-dose intradermal vaccine, ZyCoV-D, approved. That is, we have emergency use approval for children, that is, who are older than 12 years. So this represents the first DNA vaccine based on what plasmid DNA platform, and it is called as a plug and play technology. So here, plug and play technology meaning, so whichever maybe the technology can be used for the other, that is for other diseases. The only variation is the gene. So in this case, it is a gene for spike protein. Say maybe for some other virus, it can be the gene for whatever may be the component that can be introduced into the plasmid. And we all know that these plasmids are extra chromosomal material, and this plasmid actually does not get integrated into the genome. So it behaves as an independent component. And so from this DNA, there was synthesis, that is, there was transcription into mRNA. mRNA moves into the cytoplasm, and from mRNA, the spike protein was formed for immunization. Now, there is one problem with DNA vaccine delivery. So in case of RNA, we had the mRNA that is being delivered by the lipid nanoparticle. And in case of, we also saw the virus as a vector for carrying the genetic material in case of adenovector vaccine. But in case of DNA, we do not have any delivery system because of its double-stranded nature and being a plasmid. So there are two methods that were evaluated, and Zydus Cadila adopted that is the PharmaJet needle system. It is actually basically a needle-free system, and this is called as Tropis. The trade name is Tropis. So it uses PharmaJet. It uses a jet of liquid to see that the DNA is delivered into the skin. So there is another technique, electroporation. Electroporation has been used by other groups in order to deliver the DNA vaccine into the cells of the skin. So how does the DNA vaccine work? So we have the circular strands of DNA known as plasmids are injected into the skin. So these plasmids encode the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2 together with a promoter sequence for turning the gene on. So once inside the recipient cells, the plasmids enter the nuclei of the cells, but they do not integrate with the cell genome. Because they are independent entities, they act as they are able to have transcription into the mRNA, and which travels to the cytoplasm. It travels to the main body of the cell into the cytoplasm, and then it is translated into the virus spike protein itself. And then we have the body's immune system that mounts a response against the protein and produces specific immune cells that fights the future infection. And these plasmids typically degrade within weeks or months, but the immunity lasts. So here, this technology has a number of advantages, because this plasmid, it is not getting incorporated into the host cell genome. It is not infectious. It has no potential toxicity from vectors. The adenovector was causing a lot of toxicity when initially they were studying, and later they found ways to make this adenovector incapable of multiplying. So there is no potential toxicity from vectors, and there is minimal risk of anti-vector immunity. Like how we saw that Sputnik vaccine, there is a need to have two adenovectors, because for the first one there could be development of immunity. And it is non-replicating and non-integrating plasmid. It does not multiply, it does not get integrated, and it carries the gene of interest, making it very safe. Now, because it is entering into the nucleus, and then we are having the formation of both mRNA and translation into the protein, it stimulates both the humoral and the cellular arms of the immune response. And the plasmid technology has been studied for over decades. So there is a rapid and a scalable manufacturing process. So the plasmid has to be, the synthesis is well understood, and we have a scalable manufacturing process. And there is improved vaccine stability when compared to mRNA vaccine. mRNA vaccine, one of the challenge is that it is not stable. It has to be stored in minus degrees. Otherwise, there is the stability of mRNA is affected. So with this, let us look at the PharmaJet Tropis needle-free system. So we can see that actually here it delivers vaccine intradermally into the dermis, into the dermal region, by using a narrow precise fluid system. So in the picture, we can see the dermal region, narrow dermal region, with the help of a jet of fluid. The DNA has been delivered into the dermis. So in the dermis, we have the dendritic cells which take up the, that is the DNA. And then we have further processing or production of the antibodies. So thus, this represents the first DNA vaccine, and it has been developed by our Indian company. So again, another milestone in Indian pharmaceutical industry, research and development. Now let us look at the recent developments. Now Bharat Biotech, it has been testing intranasal vector vaccine for developing as a booster dose. So this nasal vaccine stimulates both the nasal, that is, it provides immunity in the nasal mucosa. So not only entry is prevented, that is also further the entry of the disease into the system is prevented. And this stimulates broader immune response, both neutralizing IgG, mucosal and a T cell response, and that enables responses at the site of infection, blocking both infection and transmission. Advantages of nasal vaccine. Excuse me, one second. Sorry about the. So advantages of nasal vaccine, we have nasal mucosa has excellent potential for vaccination. It is non-invasive and needle-free. There is ease of administration, elimination of needle-associated risk, high compliance. It is very easy. I mean, since it is not causing pain, it has high compliance and scalable manufacturing to meet the global demand. So here the vaccine that has been used is a vector vaccine. See, it is the chimpanzee adenovirus, modified chimpanzee adenovirus, similar to Covishield. And this virus has been then, it has been converted into a nasal vaccine. That is, we have a vector which carries the spike protein. And this vector is then delivered into the nasal mucosa for development of immunity. The conclusion, COVID-19 has provided a platform for successful testing of next generation vaccines, which are distinct from conventional systems. Success has been achieved as a result of groundbreaking research in nucleic acid therapeutics and successful development of delivery technologies, both resulting from decades of intensive research. Lipid nanoparticle, adenovector, DNA delivery systems exhibit potential for new vaccines and new delivery system options for treating diseases plaguing the world. I want you to look into these references. Kulkarni and Peter Kullis, they are the founders, or they are the ones who developed the LNP technology. And they developed the technology, and Onpattro was the first, as we discussed, was the first gene therapy that is a candidate that was used. And also look into that article, The Tangled History of mRNA Vaccines, which indicates the journey that led to mRNA vaccines. And also look into the work of Katalin Kariko and Drew Weissman. So they are the ones who developed the mRNA vaccines. They stabilized the mRNA vaccine. They made it they decreased the inflammatory response. They made it more safe. And Professor Sarah Gilbert and the group, they're the ones who developed this adenovirus ChAd ADOX1 technology. So they made it in such a way, it's a platform technology. Any gene can be introduced into this adenovector, into this adenovirus, so that it acts as a vector. So with this, I thank you all for your patient hearing. I thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to talk on a topic that is very close to my heart. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. I can say it was a very emerging topic, what actually was required. And you gave us very good insights about the mRNA vaccines which are available in the market and how they actually work and what is the mechanism. And very important is LNP, which are used for this vaccine drug delivery system. Thank you, ma'am. There are a few questions from the delegates, ma'am.
Okay, sure. I'll be very happy to answer them.
The first question is, what about the booster dose necessity for the COVID-19?
See, in case of mRNA vaccine, see, one thing we have to remember is this in case of mRNA vaccine, this mRNA vaccine is actually the step is from mRNA vaccine we are getting the proteins. So when we are getting the and the proteins are used as a means for developing the antibodies. So over a period of time, the information that has been gathered for the production of these antibodies is lost, especially in case of mRNA vaccine. Because it is found that in case of the adenovector virus, since it is entering into the nucleus, and we are having that is formation of mRNA transcription and translation phase, that it is found to actually, that is, you are having both arms of the immune system. Not only the production of the antibodies, but also the memory cells, the T cells are formed. So that is actually conferring memory, and as a result of which it is seen that the antibodies are there for a longer period of time, and maybe there is no need for a booster dose in case of the adenovector the vaccine. Now, in case of the Covaxin, see, it has been actually grown for a long, number of what they call as passages in viro cells. They made it inactive, and then they have used a propionolactone to inactivate further. So what happens is that there are that actually decreases the immune what you call response potential. Though they have used adjuvants, that is aluminum derivatives have been used as adjuvants, and what is called as a toll-like receptor has been used as an adjuvant. It is seen that still after some time, like Bharat Biotech is saying that after 6 months, maybe we need this adenovector vaccine. So see, again, see, this has been a new disease. We are having new systems being tested. So we are trying to understand, but it has been found that in mRNA vaccine, definitely there seems to be a need, whereas in case of adenovector, the need is not actually seen, whereas in case of Covaxin also, they say there is a need, which is again, not really, I mean, again, we are learning. And this nasal vaccine can also be a means for delivering to children, maybe as such.
Yes, ma'am, that's true. Ma'am, there's one more question. In industrial scale, which method is employed to prepare LNP?
Yeah, this microfluidic method is being followed. See, it is a very industrially viable. It has been actually what you call validated. Is being formed. Is being used.
And there's one more question, ma'am. Will the administration of two different types of vaccines, like Covaxin and Covishield, will be effective?
That is again, many people, I mean, you must have been reading in the news, they have said that first mRNA vaccine followed by Covishield is effective. And again, what Bharat Biotech is doing is actually the same thing. Covaxin, after Covaxin, they're trying to use an adenovector vaccine. See, we call it as Covishield. It is called as Vaxzevria in Europe because it was developed in collaboration with Oxford Group in collaboration with the AstraZeneca, isn't it? So we have, so here it is already been tested. It has been already found to be effective.
One more question. In case of DNA based vaccines, will there be any chance of mutation of any other microorganisms previously had infected the host to uptake the DNA part and mutate?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Maybe there is some other genetic component which can integrate the plasmid with the DNA. But of course, we can never say. But the chances being plasmids being extra chromosomal in nature, they remain as independent entities, the chances are less. Again, the plasmid has been so modified that you have only the promoter for the gene, for activating the gene. So like a lot of work has been done to see that, again, the plasmid in no way will integrate with the genome. And it has been actually a lot of work has been done, but still there is always a question.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, there is one more question, whether third dose of Covaxin or Covishield is necessary to take. Please share some insights on pediatric COVID-19 vaccine also.
See, actually, if you see, like they have been telling, I don't whether you like, I mean, from the news, like Covaxin, they say that it can be given to children about 2 years. That is what one of the latest news says. And the nasal vaccine, they say that it can be given to children, that is again, reports say that less than 12 years, but again, the years per se has not been mentioned. So the question is, for children, they say Covaxin is safe because of the time-tested conventional method of preparing a vaccine.
Yes, ma'am, that's true. Ma'am, there's one more question. I think so, sir is trying to update us. Ma'am, will the administration of 2 different types of vaccines like Covaxin and Covishield are more effective? In case of DNA-based vaccine, will there be any chance of mutations? Ma'am, you have answered this question. For previously had infected at the host to uptake DNA part and mutate. If mutation or spike protein gene occurs in SARS-CoV-19 virus, then what would be, what good will be these vaccines then?
See, actually, that is why the technology, if you see, there is a, what you call as plug and pull technology. So these are actually the groups, especially adenovector vaccine group, they have developed it as a platform. So suppose you are having a gene, there is a mutation. So that mutant gene can be introduced into that vector so that it carries the gene. That is one point. That is, the technologies have all been sort of a platform technology. So you just have to replace the gene with the new gene in question. Now, coming to the point of this mutant variable, when Covaxin was developed, so the cells that they took, actually they obtained from National Institute of Virology, Pune. So by the time they took the cells and then they grew it, by the time some time had elapsed. So it is seen that the cells that they had taken was actually having that it was a variant form. So that is why they say that this Covaxin is effective against a Delta variant. You must have read in the reports. So that means, in other words, the cells that they have used had that variant, was a variant, enabling that is immunity against the variant form is given in the, is been reported.
Yes, ma'am. I think so you have answered to all the questions, ma'am. Messages are flowing in regarding it. It was very nice session. Narsimurthy sir also had joined the session, ma'am. He has conveyed that your session was very excellent. It was a comprehensive presentation and it was simple and technical at the same time. And all other delegates are also telling that your session was very good, ma'am. Thanking you for giving such an excellent and very good technical session. Thank you, ma'am. And it was a need for the present. We had so many questions how actually it was working on us after taking a vaccine and all that. So it was a very informative and a very good session, ma'am, and a very nice session. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
And one more kind request to join at 3 p.m. for the validatory function.
Okay,
and give me a kind inputs to conduct more such kind of programs in the future. Your inputs are very much required, ma'am.
Sure, I'll definitely join. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I request Narsimurthy sir also to join for the validatory function at 3 p.m.
I'll join, madam.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, ma'am. Shall I end the meet, ma'am?
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. For the delegates, please join the validatory session at 3 p.m. Okay, you need to give your valuable feedback for the sessions. Okay, I request all the delegates to kindly keep your cameras on. Okay, and speak on how the sessions were conducted, whether the deliberations you liked, true feedback, honest feedback on all our speakers, as well as the conduct at Kelly College of Pharmacy, Hubballi. I thank all the delegates for your patient listening for these two sessions. In first session, there was a technical glitch. It was solved within 5-10 minutes. So that was not an issue. I have posted the feedback for the ma'am session in your, that is WhatsApp group. I'll be posting here also. Kindly be patient so that you can give your feedback before leaving the session. A feedback form has been posted. Kindly give your valuable feedback. Yeah, Sunil Shastri sir, please keep your camera on, at least on the validatory session. I know there'll be a lot of disturbances, but I want my delegates to, I want to see them personally. That is one reason. Second reason is I want you all to interact on this platform so that we can know each other much better. And please give your valuable feedback and honest feedback. So we shall meet at 2:50. Kindly join at 2:50 so that we'll exactly start the validatory function at 3 p.m. and we shall end in half an hour or so. We'll not keep the session very long. So because one more test has to be conducted that will last for 40 minutes. Questions have been already designed. All the questions have been given from your respective speakers. So there'll be a test which will be taken, and I will tell you the details of the test after the validatory function. Thank you so much. So shall I end the meet now? Thank you.